Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and we are back. And today we are going to be taking a look at some of the moves, the bigger moves that happened during free agency. If you like this content, want to see more videos like it, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. So let's get right into it. So the Tampa Bay Lightning had a really good free agency period, and I think a lot of people are kind of on the polarizing side of things with Tampa, and I totally understand that. I think it's very fair to judge what Tampa Bay did, but they're going in a new direction. So Steven Stamkos leaves. We'll be making a video entirely about that, him going to Nashville, but who else left the door, right? So Stamkos leaves. Now we also have a trade where we saw Sergachev get traded right around, I think it was day 2 of the draft. And it ended up being a really good trade, in my opinion. I think the addition of Connor Geekie, J.J. Moser, and some of those picks, I think the players that Tampa got back, yeah, it sucks losing a top 20 defenseman in the National Hockey League in Sergachev. Absolutely. But this is a situation where, yeah, you have McDonough coming back. Now you've got Moser also on that left side alongside Victor Hedman. This is a really good left side for Tampa still. It's not as good with Sergachev no longer there, but it's still very serviceable. And they also were able to add a guy like Connor Geekie to the fold. And, of course, who they also brought in free agency. They traded for his rights from Carolina. And the Tampa Bay Lightning signed Jake Guentzel to a 7-year, $9 million per season contract. So this is huge for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And this is hard to say because I love Stammer. I think he's been so good for the Tampa Bay Lightning. He is their first overall pick. He was the core to that franchise, the captain of that team. And they're taking a bit of a risk here with Guentzel. And I think it's a worthy risk. I think a lot of teams around the league would do the exact same thing here as Tampa. But considering the circumstance of letting Stamkos go, the perception from around the league, that's a tough PR move to sell. I understand that. But you have to consider Jake is in the prime of his career. He's been playing really well. And this is a more sustainable option than Stamkos. That's the reality of it. As much as it sucks to say, I love Stamkos. He's the reason I started liking the Tampa Bay Lightning. Back in, 2014, 2015, I ended up getting my first Lightning jersey because of Stamkos. So I'm one of those people that totally gets it. And the way it was handled by Julien Brisebois, not a fan of that either. And yeah, the perception of the Tampa Bay Lightning being the East Coast version of the Vegas Golden Knights right now is valid and fair. Let's not beat around the bush. That's a very valid point. I think overall, listen, Brisebois is thinking to himself, listen, if we win the Cup in 2025, as much as it sucks to say, everybody's going to forget pretty quickly that Stamkos is no longer here and Sergachev. And that's kind of the way you have to look at this move. If you're Tampa Bay Lightning's management right now, is if we go out there and have a better season than what we've had the last 2 years, we're going to quickly be forgotten for what we did here. So, like I said, I think you consider, all things considered, right, they lose a top pairing defenseman in the league, right, with Sergachev. You lose the core, the captain of your franchise, and Stamkos, but you bring in J.J. Moser. Yes, he's not either of those players, but he's a really serviceable defenseman on a cheaper contract, a really good addition on the left side, and more fitting for a third pairing role. Then you also add Connor Geekie, who has the potential to be a very, very talented top 6 center, forward, wherever he ends up playing in Tampa. That's a really good replacement, and he's also on his entry-level contract. He was signed in, 2022, 2023? He was drafted by the Arizona Coyotes very recently. So he is still on his entry-level deal. Tampa likes those. And then you've also got what you added with Guentzel in free agency, and that's a goal scorer, right? So this is one of those moves. If you're a Tampa fan, I understand. It's frustrating. It sucks. But the reality of the situation is here, you're adding a group of guys that you needed to make a change here. And what's that saying? It's insanity is kind of driven from doing the same thing over and over again. And as much as it sucks to say, the last 2 years, the standard has risen in Tampa. If they are not going to the Stanley Cup final and winning championships, they're going to make moves. And Julien Brisebois is now putting his DNA and his footprint on this team. And this is the first real big moves he's made. And listen, we might look next year and say, damn, Brisebois completely tanked the Tampa Bay Lightning with some of those moves he made. But this is a risk he was willing to take, a risk he was willing to make in order to acquire guys like Gensel and some of the other younger players he acquired. And this is a situation here where Tampa Bay has been giving up so many. They've been hemorrhaging so many draft picks for so long, and especially looking at deals like the Tanner Jeannot trade and things like that. Tampa needed to recoup the prospects and the draft picks. And this was just a necessary evil for Tampa Bay. And at this rate, I'm quite happy with what they did. And I know a lot of people are not so keen on what Brisebois did, and that's fair. But I got to say, I think the Tampa Bay Lightning looked pretty good here. And, despite losing a guy like Anthony Duclair as well, who was kind of an acquisition at the deadline, I think Tampa Bay is okay. And I think a lot of people who are, what's that saying? The teams that are parading in the streets winning the offseason don't typically be the teams the following season that are celebrating their Stanley Cup championship, right? We've heard this with Toronto, with Boston, with the Rangers, all these different teams. They win in the summer, but when it comes to on the ice and winning the Stanley Cup, that isn't necessarily a correlation. So remember that with all of these signings, with all of these trades that are made, it's probably going to end up being the trade that you don't think much about. I look back a couple years ago when Mika Zibanejad for Derek Brassard trade, and that was seen as a big trade at the time. But boy, will we see the magnitude of that now and just how massive that trade is. But at the time, it wasn't seen as that big of a trade. So it's one of those things you have to put things in perspective. Like a situation with Sergachev here, right? Sergachev is a very good defenseman. Utah's going to love him. But because of that serious freak injury he had at MSG last year, is that foot complication going to be an issue for him moving forward in his career? And that's something Tampa Bay wasn't really wanting to play around with, and they decided to go in a different direction. And that could end up being a great trade for Utah, where he comes back and he is back to form like he normally was, or we never see that version of Sergachev again because of this recent injury. And you never really know. That's the gamble with trading and making moves like that. But some teams win them, and sometimes you lose them. And hopefully you're winning more than you're losing those moves. But I have to say, for the Tampa Bay Lightning here, I want to know what you guys think down below, because I think Tampa did really well here. And I know a lot of people don't like it, but man, I think the cap hit is a little high for Gensel at $9 million, but this is the new NHL. And you have to remember, the salary cap is going to start going up again. So in 7 years from now, basically a decade, how much is $9 million in that perspective going to even look like? Within the next 3 or 4 years, that might end up looking like a bargain if Gensel is what we expect him to be. This actually could be a really solid contract for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And as of today, we look and say, woof, that's a lot of money. Look at the perspective of the future, right? And 7 years from now, what could that contract potentially look like? That's how you have to have the mindset. That's what GMs, that's why they're GMs, and they're not normal people running these franchises, because, boy, if the people that were in the comment section for most of these NHL videos and channels and, Instagram posts and things like that, the NHL would be a very interesting place, and maybe not for the better. But I'd love to know what you guys think. As always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you again next time.